Hi, good morning. Okay, so we'll start this week with introduction and overview of machine learning. In the past 3 weeks, we have built a base for understanding this very important part of data science. And till now, what we have discussed was mainly descriptive data science. That is, we learned certain techniques where we can describe what kind of data we have got. Now we will see that if we have got data, how we can make predictions based on that. And we'll work with the example of the housing price that we have been given some past data about attributes of the houses and the median value of the houses. Based on that, we will try to make a prediction that if a new house comes with another feature, what could be the price, and the process, that how do we determine that our prediction model is good. We have got a fair degree of understanding that how do we assess that our prediction model is good. And that was basically finding out the data that we have, we build a model, then with that model we make a prediction, then we see what is the difference between the production and the actual, and that is what we will consider as an error in our production, because our prediction is not giving the right number. So whatever is the difference between the prediction which we make and the actual value, that we'll consider as an error. And that error with certain modification, like we do the square of that, then we take the average of that, then we take the root of that, is called the RMSE. And the other measure we talked about was the R squared, which is explaining that how much the total variance that we have in the actual price of the houses is explained by models. These were the two main things we will use for assessing how much is how much accurate our prediction model is. But before we start doing that with certain logic, let's try to understand better what machine learning is and go into the certain foundational concepts of machine learning. The first question is that what is learning? So as it is defined in Wikipedia, and one of the generally accepted definitions of learning is that learning is the process of acquiring new understanding, new knowledge, new behavior, new skills or values or attitudes and preferences. Now, if we are going to learn something new, then even in the nature we see that there are certain species which learn faster, they can learn more, and there are certain things which actually don't learn new things. So human beings starting from childhood, they have got the capability to acquire this new knowledge, whatever the knowledge we are born with, or whatever is the knowledge which is genetically given to us, which is contained in our DNA or which is contained in our genes. Apart from that, we can acquire the new knowledge. Now, same thing happens with certain animals, but to a lower degree. So, and nowadays, some of the machines, with the help of certain types of software, they can process and acquire new understanding or new knowledge. That is the main area of our discussion today and over the next few sessions. So let's see if learning is all about acquiring the new understanding, acquiring the new knowledge, or a new behavior. And how do the machines do that? And
we try to answer this question from a more fundamental way, that can machines really learn? Can machines really acquire new knowledge? Can machines really acquire new understanding or new behavior? And if it happens, then how does it happen? That is what is the subject of machine learning. So let's see how machine learning happens and how it is different from the programs that we have seen earlier. What is the difference between intelligence and learning? So, learning, as we saw, is acquiring new knowledge. Intelligence by itself does not lead to learning. Intelligence may enable learning, but intelligence by itself is not learning. So let's take an example that we have a very powerful laptop, and you have different types of programs running on that. You have Excel, you have Microsoft Word, you have some systems which can play music, which can play videos. So obviously the machine is immensely intelligent because it can do lots of computations, it can do lot many other things. But you close the machine and you again restart tomorrow morning, and it does not do anything new. It may be highly intelligent, it may be able to do lots of computations in your Excel sheet and many other programs that you may have. But the fact is that from between today and tomorrow, it will not learn anything new. It will continue to do the same thing again and again and again and again, however intelligent those things may be. So even though our laptops are intelligent, they are not really learning.
Now we will see today that how the machines also can start learning. So that's the difference that we need to keep in mind. That being intelligent is not the same thing as learning. So if even a person, you would have seen people around you, that somebody, a few people in your batchmates in the colleges or batchmates in the schools, they appear to be highly intelligent, but they did not really spend their time in learning new things. So, if learning is all about acquiring new knowledge, acquiring new behavior, in that case, how the machines enable that, we will see. But before we go there, let's see how the software used to be developed earlier and how it is being done now. We have discussed this earlier, but just to reiterate, earlier, whatever software was, we were writing the programs, and these programs were processing data. So we said the data was what the programs processed earlier. We wrote the programs, or the developers wrote the programs. Those programs encoded the knowledge, some sort of knowledge, because these programs worked in different domains. So it either contained the knowledge of how to process the medical data, or how to process the business data, or how to process the data for meteorology, or how to process the data for many other fields. But the knowledge for that was encoded in the code that we wrote. And then we expected this code to process some data and give us some result. That is what we have been doing all along. But in machine learning, it is not the programs that process the data. It's not the programs which define how to process the data. The programs that we have written, it is not that which processes the data. It is the data itself which decides what should be the next course of action. It's the data itself which decides that what is the logic, what is the underlying pattern, what is the hidden logic, and based on that, it decides what to do next. So that's the difference we had earlier. The process was that there is some sort of knowledge that knowledge is encoded, and that code will process the data. Now, in machine learning, we we have data. That data, there are certain algorithms. So that data is processed, and that finds what the logic is, and then we define what the course of action or the outcome should be. So from logic to data to outcome, we have moved to data to logic to outcome. So data itself is required now to create that logic. And that's where the learning comes, that we feed the data and then the system learns what is the underlying pattern. It's the same thing that we learn from childhood. We are exposed to several things and then we learn about those things. And if we are not exposed to data, so for example, how do we learn the languages? We learn the language by listening to the people around us. So we get exposed from the childhood to different types of words, and that's why, if a child is exposed to, say, Telugu as a language, where the Telugu is being spoken around him, he learns to speak Telugu. And a child which is born in a, say, North India, in a Hindi-speaking area, he gets exposed to hearing only Hindi words or only the Hindi language, and therefore he learns only Hindi. So it depends upon what data we get exposed to that our learning also happens. Similarly, in machine learning, it's the data that we expose the machine to, it's the data that we allow the machines to process. That is where the learning comes from. And of course, there are different types of algorithms which enable it to identify the hidden patterns and learn from the data. Now, just we should also then distinguish that just because some data is there, it doesn't mean that some meaningful learning will take place. There has to be some underlying pattern for the data to identify that pattern. So if that underlying pattern itself is not there, then we'll not be able to figure out what is that. Just one second. Why it is. Okay. So to be able to find a pattern in the data, first of all, some pattern should be there. If that pattern is not there, and if we feed that data, the system will try to understand that, and it will come out with some garbage. Let's take two examples. Let's take the phone directory. Suppose I take the phone directory of an entire country, and we feed that, and then we say that, through machine learning, let's try to find out, or let's try to predict what the phone number would be if I give the name of a person, or if I give a phone. So that kind of prediction would not be possible or meaningful, because there is no underlying pattern between the phone number that a person has got and his name. These will all be, so it will be more like a search. We can do a search on the phone number, but we can't make a prediction of the phone number. So for example, if I have, say, 10 million connections in the country, and if I feed the telephone directory for 1 million names and their numbers, I would not, based on that subset of data, I will not be able to make the prediction for the remaining 9 million, because there is no underlying pattern. So we can have a very large amount of data, but that does not mean that machines will be able to find a pattern if there is none. So the data must have an underlying pattern, and that only then a meaningful discovery or a meaningful learning is possible. So just because we have got the ability to process the data, and from that data we can learn certain patterns, it does not mean that any data can be fed into the machines and we should expect certain results. There must be some underlying patterns. On the other hand, if there is an underlying pattern, we hope that by training the machines on to learn the underlying patterns, they would be able to discover that. So for example, the buying behavior of people in the online shopping or in the physical stores,
By studying their behavior of different types of people, we can make an estimation that what are the things that they're likely to purchase.
So, for example, if somebody is buying a trouser, then possibly he will also buy a shirt or a shoe. Similarly, if a woman is coming to a store, then she may buy lipstick. But if a man is coming to the store, I mean, he also may buy lipstick for his family members. But the chances are that um, chances of that or the quantity purchased by women is would be higher. Similarly, in based on the different seasons, we know that in the rainy season, maybe umbrella would be bought in a larger number. So, based on the data that we have about the shopping um, data, that is, who are the people who visited the online stores and which items were sold. Based on that, we can make reasonable predictions about the future as to how the um sales of different items will happen. So, a few things to summarize. That is, learning is about acquiring or processing, acquiring new knowledge, acquiring new behavior, and that new behavior or new uh, knowledge comes from the data which is exposed to us, and from that data, even we as human beings, from that data, we try to make sense of it. And that making sense is nothing but trying to find a pattern. So even in the language, we see that how a language is spoken. The we intuitively grasp the grammar of that language. So grammar of say Hindi is different from the grammar of English. So even as we human beings, once we are getting exposed to the data, then we intuitively grasp the different patterns there, and then we apply that pattern for processing new data. So that's how we, even though as a child we are never taught grammar until we go to the school, still we are able to speak the language because intuitively we grasp how the grammar of a particular language is, how that language is spoken. Similarly, once we expose the once we expose our machine learning algorithms to data, then it is able to start underlying, or it's able to understand the underlying patterns, and based on that patterns we are able to create new things, or we are able to learn new things. But what's some of the fundamental questions or some of the basic questions that you may ask is that human beings are born intelligent. We are um, we are a biological product, and therefore learning is already ingrained in our DNA. Can machines really learn? Machines is an inanimate object. I mean, how can machines learn? This is one of the fundamental questions that, or one of the philosophical questions that you may ask. And let's try to see whether it would be really possible or not. Because if it is philosophically or fundamentally or basically, if it is not possible for machines to learn, then we can try to do a few things and will not go beyond that. For example, a dog can be trained in doing 10 different things, but it cannot be expected to do a scientific research. It cannot be expected to write a story because there are certain limitations on the way the mind or the brain of the dog is structured. It cannot go beyond a certain learning certain things. So differently, the dogs can learn, but dogs cannot learn several things. Similarly, we should ask the question that is there a limitation on machines? What are the things that machines can learn, and what are the things that machines may not be able to learn? And it is in that context that we need to understand machine learning. So machines can do several things, and we have seen that how the capability of machines in doing things are changing and it is increasing day after day, day after day. But in all of these things, one of the key differences is that maybe the machines are doing different kinds of things today, but all of that has been, all that learning or all that ability has been induced by the human beings into the machines. So machines can do wonderful things. Machines can fly, but they can fly because they have been programmed to fly. It means that we have again followed the previous process, that we have written the code for the machine to analyze different things and then they can fly. I mean, of course, machines today are also employing a large amount of artificial intelligence and machine learning. So today, machines are also not just do something which is programmed, they also learn. But if we leave aside that machine learning or the artificial intelligence part, machines were still doing a lot of wonderful things, but they were doing the things for which they were programmed. And there were no new learning happening before the machine learning actually came in. So if you see, machines can fly. So the question that we could ask, that if machines can fly, why can't they learn? And in this context, we take one example of what is the basic difference and what are the different things that we are doing today that we feel that machines can learn, and machine can actually start learning at a faster pace today than they were doing earlier. So earlier we observed that birds can fly, and several people thought that if birds can fly, why can't I fly as a human being? Or why can't we make machines which can fly? And that, you would have read about the stories that people, strapped wings to their arms and then they jumped from the mountains or hill or cliff, and they were not able to really fly. I mean, many of them fell down and died. But we were able to make some progress when we understood the principles of aerodynamics, not by just imitating the birds, but when we saw that the birds fly because there is certain underlying principles of aerodynamics, and that's why the birds are able to fly. Having understood those principles of aerodynamics, then we were able to create our own objects which could fly. And then, having understood those principles, now we were able to make machines which are much larger than, much bigger than, and much more capable than the birds. Now, our aircrafts and birds, in terms of the flying capability, there is no comparison at all. The aircrafts can fly for thousands and thousands of miles in few hours. No birds can do that. The aircrafts can carry, hundreds of tons of weight. No bird can do that. So once we understand the principles of an underlying thing, principles of a given domain, then we can apply those principles into machines, and then the machines become much more capable compared to the biological versions of things which do the same, which perform the same actions. So if you see in terms of flying, we can see that birds can fly and aircrafts can also fly. And both of them fly because they are following certain principles of aerodynamics. So whether birds realize or not, whether the aircrafts realize or not, unless they adhere to the underlying principles of the aerodynamics, both of them will not be able to fly. So in that case, now we can see that the birds are a biological version of a machine, or a biological version which implements the principle of aerodynamics, and the aircraft is a mechanical version which is able to implement the principle of aerodynamics. So if you see, the underlying thing is the aerodynamics, and we should start thinking about bird as the biological version and aircraft as the mechanical version. If we think from that perspective, then let's apply the same thing. If I understand the principle of something. May it be for principle of learning, may it be principle of how the medicine works. If you're able to understand that, and if you're able, then there could be a biological version, and then there could be artificial version or the mechanical version, because the principle, if as long as we are able to understand the principle and apply the principle, it should work in the same fashion. Let's see how earlier memory was supposed to be a domain of human beings. Just 1 second, we have a question. Okay, the question is that does Alexa come under machine learning algorithm, or is just acting because of predefined actions or algorithms we have inside? Okay, so if you see, we will go into some of these things that is a part of the natural language processing. So Alexa is actually combining the two. So Alexa would not be able to interact with you if there is no machine learning. So even if I speak to Alexa just as we speak to our family members, just as we speak to another human being, we do not speak in the predefined manner. So I may ask the question in somewhat different manner compared to what you may ask somebody else. So Alexa is able to make sense of different contexts. So the understanding, the conversation that we have with Alexa is able to understand because it has got some artificial intelligence behind that. Now the answers that Alexa gives, it is partly the search, which is also the artificial intelligence is embedded in the search, because today the search is also not really programmed, and obviously you can't really program for searching things across different types of domains or across different types of things. So the way that Alexa interacts with us and able to understand what we are speaking or what instructions we are giving to Alexa, there is artificial intelligence. Then based on interpretation of that, it goes and searches for the information. There is artificial intelligence there. And in some cases, even the response that it gives, there is an artificial intelligence embedded in how the response is crafted. So for example, when you say, Alexa, good morning, Alexa starts giving you the information about the weather, the news. Now the news that it reads, many times or most of the time, the news it will gather from different sources. Then there is an artificial intelligence engine which is summarizing that news. For example, many of you would have taken the subscription of InShots, which gives you the headline of the news, and then you can click on the link and see the full news. So how is that summarization happening? That summarization is not really happening or not really being done by somebody sitting in the office or on his desk. These summary of the news item is actually being derived by the machine learning algorithms, and that is what Alexa actually speaks out to you. So in the entire life cycle of your interaction with Alexa, that is, we ask a question, Alexa understands it, then it goes and search for the answer, and then it gives you the response. In all the three stages, there is a huge amount of artificial intelligence which is working in the backend. Okay, so we are talking about a few things. Let's see how the transition has happened. Maybe a few decades a few decades earlier, we used to think that memory is actually the sole domain of human beings. Memory resides only in the human brain and to some extent in the brain of the animals. The things which are non-biological or things which are inanimate, like say a table or a chair or any machine, that will not have a memory. But see how things have changed today. Even in our hand phones or even our mobile phones, the kind of memory that it has got, No human being can even imagine that that kind of memory he would have. So my phone can store maybe thousands and thousands of the phone numbers for my friends, my family members, my business colleagues. I just can't recall that, and for that matter, no human beings will be able to recall, memorize those numbers. But my handphone does. Similarly, so many other things. So memory as a capability, which was supposed to be only
belonging to or the sole domain of human beings and the animals, now over the past few decades we have seen that once we are able to understand how the memory is stored and how the memory is retrieved, or how an information is stored and how the information is retrieved, that's what memory is all about. So once we have understood the principle of how an information can be stored and retrieved, then we can now say that human beings are the biological implementation of memorization, and the machines are the artificial implementation or the mechanical implementation or the electronic implementation of the same principle of how memorization happens, or how the information storage and information retrieval happens. And once we are able to do that, then we see that typically in all the cases wherever we have been able to understand the underlying principles much better, the machines start doing things in a much better fashion compared to human beings. And sometimes, if you close your eyes and think, it's a very humbling experience. Throughout, for several thousands of years, we used to think that the capabilities that the human beings have got is actually, especially in terms of thinking, in terms of memorization, nobody else or no other uh, animal or no other being on the entire planet can do that, and therefore we are the most superior race. I mean, of course, the machine learning is also happening because we as human beings are enabling that, but in terms of the capability, now we are seeing that those things which are supposed to be the sole domain of human beings, now machines are performing much better. So memory, which was supposed to be the sole domain of human beings, we have seen that how the machines have overtaken us decades back. So the kind of things that the machines can memorize, we just can't even imagine. Then came communication. Now we have only heard in our uh, maybe stories of Mahabharata that how the war was happening at some other place, and Sanjay was describing the happenings in the war to Dhritarashtra. But those were mostly stories for us. Now we see that in terms of communication, how we can communicate in a much better fashion using the machines, which was not possible earlier. And now the same thing is being applied on to learning. So following these examples that we have, that if we are able to crack the code of aerodynamics, that is, if we are able to understand the principles of aerodynamics, if we are able to crack the code of memorization, that is how to inform, how to store and retrieve uh, information, then we can make the machines fly, then we can make the machines memorize. And therefore, if we understand the underlying principles of learning, then it is possible that we can train the machines to learn. And then it also opens up the possibility that maybe the machines can learn faster and better compared to human beings. So this is in the realm of possibility, and we have seen that in some specified areas, or in many of these specialized areas, actually the machines are learning faster than what human beings do. We will, as we go along our journey of machine learning, we will take some examples and we will actually train the machines to do things, and you will be surprised to see that how you can train the machines in doing things, which and how we can train the machine to learn some of those things which we as human beings will actually take much longer. For example, um, we will as we go into the natural language processing, we will try to feed the machine to, I mean, we'll try to feed some stories like Mahabharata or Romeo and Juliet and few other stories there, and we'll ask certain intelligent question. So, for example, once we feed the Mahabharata entire text into the um, algorithm that we will train, and then we'll ask some question which is not actually written there. For example, who was the brother of Nakul? And it will answer Sahadev. Now, that particular information is not written as such anywhere. So it's not really a search. It is finding that by association. That is how the words are coming, and therefore it is able to make out that who is, related to whom, and which are the similar words. So, for example, even though there is no dictionary inside the Mahabharata, it will be able to tell you that Parth is actually the name of Arjuna. So Arjuna himself is being addressed as Parth in many places and things like that. So we will start training the computers in doing those things. But coming back to the underlying fundamental principle, what we are saying now is that just as once we discovered the principles of aerodynamics, we were able to create an artificial implementation or a mechanical implementation of flying, which is the aircraft. And in our mind now, we can say that birds are a biological implementation of the principle of aerodynamics, and aircrafts are the mechanical implementation of the principles of aerodynamics. Similarly, a memory chip or a computer which can, which has got a memory chip, it is the implementation of the principles of information storage and retrieval. So human beings or certain animals are the biological implementation of the same principle, and the computers are the artificial implementation or the electronic implementation of the same principle. And therefore, if we are able to discover the underlying principle of learning, that is the computational theory of intelligence or computational theory of learning, then we should be able to implement that as a, we should be able to create an artificial implementation or a electronic implementation of the same principle, and we can make the machines learn. So that is the philosophical foundation whether machines can learn or not. So many of us had that doubt earlier that intelligence is something which is very unique to human beings, but then we are saying that no, it is not. Let's try to understand how this intelligence comes from, how this capability to learn comes from. What is this learning process? And if we are able to put the same process into a machine, then machines will also start learning. There is nothing so mystic about it. Let's try to understand how learning happens, and then we can create an artificial implementation of the same process, just as we have done for flying, just as we have done for memorization. That forms the philosophical foundation of machine learning. And then we start imagining that just as we have been able to make aircrafts which are much more powerful than birds, just as we have been able to make computers which are much more powerful in terms of memory, we can make machines which are much more powerful in terms of learning. And that's what machine learning is all about. Okay. So in that direction, we say that, okay, let's see that how learning happens in the human brain. A lot of progress has been done there. Then we see that once you think in that direction, then you start seeing that having a brain, having the neurons inside the brain, and the different parts that we have, which is called neurons, the synapses, the axons, and all that, they are like the biological implementation of the, the thinking process or the computational process. But when we see in the word of electronics, it will take different shapes. So we don't have to, once we another very important thing to note here is that once we understand the principle, then we don't have to imitate the biological things that we have seen. So for example, once we understood the principles of aerodynamics and we created the aircrafts They have some similarity with the birds, but they don't follow the same principle. So, for example, the aircrafts don't fly by flapping their wings. Their wings are all, fixed. They don't flap their wings. Still, the aircraft is able to fly. The memory chips don't look anything like our brain, but still we are able to make the information. Uh, we are may, we are able to store the information there. We are able to retrieve the information, and therefore, even in machine learning, eventually, it did not really imitate, or it may have very little similarity with the way that human thinks, as long as we are able to apply the principles of learning there. Okay. Then we So, having understood that, yes, there is a possibility that machines can learn, and then we start thinking that actually, if that becomes possible, the learning can be taken to an extent which maybe as human beings we would never be able to do. And one of the reasons is, just as we saw that the uh, aircrafts can become much more powerful, even in terms of computing, even in terms of learning new things, the machines possibly could surpass us, because ultimately, as human beings, we have limitations on, size of the brain that we have, the kind of connections that we have, the number of neurons that we have, how much information they can process. There is a limitation on that one. But if we are able to externalize this process, then a large amount of this limitation can actually be done away with. For example, we can go on adding chips, and the computing power can go on increasing. We are seeing that the processing power of the chips is going on increasing. We can go on adding the memory chips, and therefore we can go on increasing the capability of the individual machines. Not only that, we can combine the operation of different machines. So I can have n number of different servers running, and I could do the parallel processing on these servers. So now all these large big tech companies like Google, I mean, millions and millions of people use that simultaneously, but it is still able to give us a very fast response because it has got those server farms. It means that it is able to make very powerful machines, supercomputers, work together. And therefore, we can combine the processing power of the machines in such a way that is not possible with the human beings. So maybe if two of us are there, there is no the way that machines can work together, our human minds don't work together in the same fashion. And therefore, it opens up the possibility that we can actually, just as we have been able to create much more powerful flying machines, we might be able to create machines which are much more capable, even in terms of learning, compared to the human beings. And that is where the great possibilities open up. And things are happening already. So, in terms of the computation power, we have known that for years now that machines can do computations much faster, even though we have certain exceptions like Shakuntala Devi and a few other people who do faster computation. The thing is that in general, the machines would do much faster computation. And with the passage of time, so maybe at one point of time, Shakuntala Devi was doing certain things or certain computations much faster than the machine, but the machines have been evolving. 20 years back, when she was doing all these things, the power of machines and the power of machines that we have today, supercomputers we have got, and then we are moving into the quantum computing. Now, other thing is that whatever are the biological things, you can't really increase their limitations without altering their DNA. Whereas in the machines, we can increase their capability year by year, especially in, earlier we had certain types of machines, then we have the supercomputers now, and now we are talking about the quantum computing. And some of you would have read that article about the quantum computing, that Google is working on quantum computing as well, which is a completely different technique of computing. And with that, they are able to process the data in 3 minutes, which would take 10,000 years for a supercomputer to process. So that is the kind of revolution we are talking about in terms of computation capacity. So anyway, the even a normal machine computes things much faster than the human brain. Supercomputers are millions of times faster than that. And now we are talking about quantum computing, which will, you can see the difference that a supercomputer can process that information in 10,000 years. And that is being done by the quantum computers in just 3 minutes. So you can see the difference and you can see the kind of possibilities that we have. But then we ask the question that, okay, philosophically, theoretically, if we say that machines can learn, then how do they learn? So we go into the mechanics of this, that having understood that it is possible in principle, how it will actually happen. So we are asking the same kind of question that, okay, if we understand the principle of aerodynamics, then let's see how we will make the aircraft and how we will make the aircraft fly. So what happens in machine learning is that we make data available to machines, and then the machines will, by seeing that data, it will try to learn the underlying principle, but that learning happens with certain algorithms. Now those are the algorithms which make sense of that data, and these are called the learning models. Okay, so first we see that what are these models. So these models are like any other model. It's like a general template, and that will have certain modifiable parameters. Now what the machines learns is these parameters. So for example, if we take the housing price data, what were the parameters we saw in the algorithm would be the regression algorithm. And regression algorithm says that given that I have a series of uh, independent variables and the corresponding dependent variables, then the regression algorithm will try to find out an equation, and that equation is the model. So earlier we saw that that equation, in the simple example that we had taken, that equation was that y is equal to bx plus c. Now that's the model. And then what our machine learning algorithm will do, and as we were trying to do it manually, is to find out the value of those parameters. So these parameters, what were those parameters? The parameters are b and c. The x value is the observed value, the x value is the data, and y is the value that we want to predict. So based on the past data of x and y, what we were trying to find out that what the value of b or c could be. That is what the learning process is. So by doing different iterations, by doing different computations, the system will tell you that this is the best value of b and this is the best value of c. In that process, the machine has learned how to predict the price of a house. That prediction may be close to actual, that prediction we may not be able to refine. That's a different process, that how much accuracy we have got in our process, but that's what the learning process would be. And we have seen that how the learning process happens. It follows the gradient descent method, that it will try out the prediction with one number, then it will see that whether that how far from reality or how far from the actual data that number is. And then in the algorithm itself, we have a process of optimization. So how it actually slides towards the uh, place where we will have the minimum error and so on. So we have seen the logic in the context of one of these algorithms. Similarly, a similar kind of logic would be applied when a system is trying to identify a human face, when a system is trying to convert text into voice, or text to voice, or voice to text. All these things will have certain different types of algorithms, but the core of the matter is that in all of these, we will give the system some data, then we will train certain models. So regression is one of the learning models. And when we train the model, what is the model trying to find out? It is trying to find out the most suitable or the most acceptable parameters. So in the case of regression, those parameters were the value of B and the value of C. Similarly, as we go into other kinds of algorithms, the parameters would differ. But the process remains the same, that we expose the different types of models or different types of algorithms. We give data to those algorithms, and then those models or those algorithms are trained. What is this training process? This training process is that it finds out the parameters which will help us make predictions. Okay, so in the machine learning, what we do is that we train the models. We do not create the models by themselves. The different types of the machine learning models that we have, that is being coded by us, but not the actual learning process. So for example, once the we have coded that how to find out the different parameters, or how to train, uh, how to find different parameters for regression, then we can keep feeding different types of data, housing price data, the company sales data, or the rice production data. We can go on feeding it, and it will try to find that given that particular data set, what these parameters would be. So in the machine learning, we select the model. We do not create the model as a part of the machine learning process. Okay, we select the model, and then we give the data to the model, and then we train the model. And then as a part of the training process, what the system is doing is that it is learning these parameters, and based on that parameters, we make the prediction for the future. So that is what the contour or the scope of machine learning is. When you and I do the machine learning, we are not going to create the different types of algorithms. That is the work which researchers would keep doing. So we should set our expectations very clearly. What we are going to do as machine learning experts is that these different types of algorithms which has been created, we will use those algorithms, and based and what we will learn is how to identify that which algorithm is the best suited for a given task that we have at hand, and how to train those algorithms with the data that we have. Okay, so generation of a new type of model, that is for the researchers to do, and maybe a few large organizations like Google or a few renowned universities, they are working on creating different types of models. But in our scope of work that we will do in this course, we will take those algorithms and we will see that how to train them. Okay, so we should set our expectations accordingly. So these learning algorithms, different types of algorithms that we talked about, maybe there would be a different algorithms to process the voice. There would be different algorithms for the um, image processing. There would be different algorithms for classification and for different tasks that we do. So how these models, how these learning algorithms differ? It is the learning models that we use that would be different. The performance criteria on which we assess that how my model itself is learning, that could be different. And the parameters that they are trying to optimize, those things would be different. Okay. So having learned that what machine learning is, that we will have different algorithms and we'll train those algorithms on data. And what these algorithms do is to derive the or to optimize the parameters. That is the parameters that we'll use for making prediction. Now, what are
different types of predictions or the estimators that we can call it. So the different types of estimators is that one is the parametric estimation. As you said that in regression, we'll try to find out the parameters. What is the value of B and what is the value of C? So these are the parameters. Different parameters for different contexts. The second one is called this semi-parametric estimation. It means that we do the estimation, but not for the entire data. So, for example, I could run the rice production as we have seen that there is a relationship between the rice and the rainfall. We can run that. We can create an algorithms for India as a whole or for world as a whole. We can create an estimator, or we can run regression only for India. We can run a regression only for Telangana. We can run a regression of the rice production relationship between the rice production and rainfall only for Rangareddy district. So if we do for the larger set, then we are trying to find out the parameters at a global scale, or we can do it at a local scale. So that's the parametric and the semi-parametric. And in some cases, in the machine learning model, we don't estimate any parameter. That will be some special kind of thing. Like we'll go into some of these examples, which are called the k nearest neighbors. It means that just based on the data itself, we try to make some estimation. We don't really devise any parameter there. So we'll go into some of these cases as we go along. Now the types of learning, broadly, there would be two types of, or there would be three types of machine learning. One is called the supervised learning. The second is called the unsupervised learning, and third is called the reinforcement learning. Let's see the difference between the two. I don't want you to get overloaded with these concepts in the first session. We'll discuss about these things in detail going forward also. But today, let's get to the outline of what machine learning or the different types of machine learning that we have. The first one is supervised learning. So regression that we talked about is one of the categories of the supervised learning. What is this supervised learning? Where we say that we provide to the learning algorithms the data, which is the independent variables or the predictor variables. It means that the based on which we will try to make the prediction, as well as the actual values with which we can measure that whether my prediction is correct or not. So in the regression example, we were giving the data about the rainfall, and we were also giving data about the how much rice was produced in each year. So in the machine learning language, we will say that the rainfall is the feature and the rice production is the label. So what we have seen, what we are trying to predict is called the label, and the data elements with which we make the prediction is called the features. So here in the case of the housing data, things like total bedrooms, total number of rooms, the households, the median income of the people who are living in those houses, these are the features, and the median house value is the label. So if we have been given features and labels both, that is the value of X and the value of Y both is given to you, that and the algorithms that we apply on that kind of data set is called supervised learning. It means that at least, supervised learning in the sense that somebody has supervised the data and given the labels or the predicted variables. So when we have the past data, I have the features, and somebody has supervised that what the outcome should have been. So that's what is called supervised learning. We'll also have certain algorithms, which is called the unsupervised learning. It means that you have been just given the data, and the learning algorithms have to make sense of data without being told that
what the actual output should have been. So I don't have y at all. I just have x. And there are certain kind of algorithms which we can apply. So for example, if I have data about my customers in an e-commerce or physical shop, then we can run what is called as a clustering algorithm, that out of can I group my customers into 3 or 4 or a defined number of groups which will be more homogeneous. So the system can scan through the data of all the customers and then say that, okay, looks like that there are, 3 or 4 homogeneous groups. The first group is the young professionals. Their spending habits are somewhat different. Then I have a group of the buyers, which are families with small kids. Their buying behavior is somewhat different because they buy different types of things. And then there is a group of buyers which is say 50 plus, and their buying behavior is very very different. They spend their money on different things, whereas the people with young children in their family, they spend their money in a different way. And all this, I don't have to give a label. I have just given the data to that, the demographic data, the behavior or the purchase history, and the system can figure out that these are the 3 or 4 different distinct groups. And then how do I use that? I can use that data for making my promotion. So if I know that a person belongs to this particular group, then I can try to suggest or recommend different types of things because their buying behavior now I have understood. That kind of thing is called the unsupervised learning, where you are only given the data, which you are only given the x, but there is no y available to the algorithms or the logic. The third kind of thing is the reinforcement learning, where even the past data that we give can, it may not be there, or it would be very limited. For example, when we train a machine to play a game, in that case, one way could be, so for example, when we are trying to teach the machine how to play chess, then I could give the data about the different moves which has been done by different in different games, and then by observing that how two human beings played those games, system can learn. That is a sort of, that is supervised learning. But nowadays we have moved to a different way of learning, where we give the rewards and penalties to the um, system. So we give just the rules of the games. That is my, that is what we give to the machine, and then the machine itself can play from both sides. So it will make one move based on the rules that we have defined, that okay, the knight moves like this and the queen moves like this. So we only give it the rules of the game, and then the system starts playing chess. So it will play against against itself. So both player A and player B is being driven by the learning algorithm, and eventually one of these will win. Now we say that the winner will get some reward points and the loser will get some penalty points, and the objective of my algorithm is to maximize the reward points. So what the system would do is that it will play the game by itself. So it will play the game by itself, then it may lose. So initially when you see that, it will look like to you that okay, they are playing some very basic and absurd moves, but somebody would lose and somebody would win. But then the system says that the winner gets some reward points, and therefore now the system is, now the algorithm works and say that whatever moves the winner made, it will give a higher weightage or a higher point to that. Then the games will be played again. So now the loser also is fed that that information that what are the moves that the winner has made, and therefore it will now try to improve its game. At the same time, now the winner which won the game last time, they will also play according to the uh, rules that they had done in the last time. So every time that they win or lose, the system goes on learning. I mean, the system tries new things, and therefore the new techniques or the new moves which enable it to win, that goes on getting a higher score. And therefore, with the passage of time, the machine gives a higher and higher weightage to those moves which actually make it win. And therefore, after some time of training, it has actually acquired the skill to play a very sensible moves, and it can start to play the game of chess. So that's called the reinforcement learning, where we are saying that the winning behavior gets reinforced and the losing behavior gets penalized. And therefore, over a period of time, the machine learns as to what is the behavior which will give it a higher reward. And therefore, it learns more and more uh, meaningful moves, the moves which will enable it to win. So that kind of learning is called the reinforcement learning. So there we are just providing certain rules. We are not even providing that much of data, and we are not providing the labels at all. So these are the three categories of machine learning, and we'll go into details of these one by one. So supervised learning, where you have the features and you have the labels. Features are features are the term that we will use now onwards, which is the independent variables or the predictor variables, and the labels are which is the variable which we are trying to predict, or which is also denoted by the symbol y. That's the supervised learning. The unsupervised learning is you have only x but no y, and the reinforcement learning, that where we only give certain rules, and the machines learn how to play game, or how to optimize that particular thing that we are trying to do. So that's the reinforcement learning. So these are three types of learning that we'll come across. So you have the models and you have the different types of learning. What we will be doing at our end is that we will try to train the machines on how to learn those parameters. So let's do a small exercise today, and you will see that it's not very difficult, and it does not even require that much of Python programming. So we'll take our housing data example, some of the things we've done earlier. So to start with, we import the libraries. So today we will actually see that how simply the machine can be trained to give us the best parameters. We read the housing data, and we have seen, first we try to understand the data. So since we have already gone through this step, I will not repeat that. So by seeing the housing.head, we see what are the different columns, and we try to understand those columns. These actions like getting the shape, getting the info, I will skip that. So info is more important to get, because as we have seen that before we put the data into the machine learning, then I have to process a few things. For example, if there is a data not available, we have seen this earlier, then we need to process that. And if there is a non-numeric data, we need to convert that either through the label encoding or the one-hot encoding. So we'll skip these things. We'll directly go into the machine learning part. I suppose that all of you already recall these things from the past discussion. Okay, now we'll go to the step-by-step regression. I have now a data set. As we said that this data set contains certain columns which represent the features, and there is one column which represents the label. So if you see, the median house value is something that we are trying to predict, and therefore we'll call that as y. This is the data which, using all the other data elements we have got, like all these things that we saw in the info part here. The data we have got is latitude, longitude, age of the house, total rooms in the house, bedrooms in the house. All these are my x. So x1, x2, up to xn I can have. And this median house value is something that we are trying to predict. This is my y. The first thing that I do is segregate the x and y. Okay. So how do we do that? We take the housing data and we just drop the median house value. Rest of the things is my x, or rest of the things are my features. And then I take the median house value, that becomes my y. Okay. The first step, segregate the x and y. After that, we have seen that the x that I have got, it needs to be numeric, and therefore we do the one hot encoding, and we drop the ocean proximity after we have done the one hot encoding. So I will just run this one. Okay, I haven't run this. Okay. So after we have done the one hot encoding and dropped the ocean proximity, my file looks like this, or my features look like this. So if you see the median house value, I have removed from this data set, and the ocean, island, all these things have got introduced into the data set because of the one hot encoding, and I have removed the ocean proximity because that's a non-numeric data. One more thing I had to do before we go into this is that there were certain missing data, and last time we had seen that how to get the missing data, and we have used the median value. So that was one way to replace the missing data with the median value. We'll do it today with certain libraries of sklearn, and I have been emphasizing it again and again that because of the way that the Python platform has evolved, for doing the same operation, you would have different options available, or different libraries for doing the same things available. Last time I had shown you how to do it with program with Python, finding out the median, and then we were using the fill na command, that is the fill. Today I am showing you how to do the same thing with one of the libraries called sklearn. sklearn is one of the key libraries that we'll be working with. It's a very powerful library of machine learning. So from the sklearn library, we import a function, we import a class called simple imputer. Then, as we have mentioned earlier, that moment we import anything, we create an instance of that. So I'm creating an instance of that, of the simple imputer, and I am creating that instance with missing values is not available. So if there is an NaN, or the not a number, if that kind of data is there, we will replace that by median. So this is what the meaning of this syntax is. So we are trying to fill the missing data. So we pass the parameters as that. How do we define the missing data? We can say that it is not available. We can say that where data is 0. So how do we consider that data is missing? That we can define here. So we can say that missing data is equal to 0, or we can say missing data is NaN, which is not a number. And then we say that what do we replace this missing data with? So here, that is called the strategy. And we can say here mean or median or some other formula you can give. So or we can fill that with some fixed number. So all these options are available to us. So right now our focus is on running the regression algorithm. But
Before that, the two basic things that I need to do, without which the algorithm will not run, we are doing the one hot encoding, and then we are replacing the missing numbers. So I will just run this. We'll go into the code in more detail. The objective of today's demonstration is to let you see that how simple it is. Whatever we were doing by trial and error on the Excel sheet, we can do in a very simple fashion here. So I'm not going into the description of the code here. We'll do that maybe in tomorrow's session. But just see that I am just doing the two basic operations here, which is taking care of the missing data and taking care of the non-numeric data. Okay. So now I have, if you can see here in this column, I have got everything as 640, 640. So there is no missing data here. Now we are ready for proceeding with our machine learning algorithm. So the first thing that we had did was the split between, we split our data set into X and Y. Now, once we run the algorithm, we need to assess that how accurate my prediction has been. And therefore, what we do is that we segregate our training data itself. So first we segregated the labels and the features. So I have two different data sets now. One is containing only the labels, one is containing only the features. On the label data, I ensure that it does not have a missing value. I ensure that it has only the numeric value. Now, typically before running an machine learning algorithm, what we do is that we divide our data set into two, what is called as a training set and the testing set. So we train our algorithm on the training set, and then whatever is the output we get, that is during the, as a part of the training, as we have discussed, as a part of the training, what the algorithms or the models will do, they will tell us what the parameters are. So it will give me the value of the B, it will give me the value of the C in case of regression algorithm. And then we will see that if this is the optimal parameters which or the optimal algorithm or the optimal equation which the system is telling me, based on which I am supposed to make the prediction, let's make the prediction on the testing data. Why we do that? Why can't we see it on the training data itself? Because what happens is that as we train the models, the algorithms or the machine tries to memorize some of this data, and therefore it will make a very good prediction on the training data because it has seen the training data and it can make the prediction. But the very purpose of deriving these algorithms or deriving this regression equation is for us to enable making the prediction for the data which we have not seen. So for example, if we are trying to predict, if we are trying to train our machine or run a machine learning process, the machine training process, where we want to predict that how the next customer who comes into my store, what is he likely to buy, and therefore I can take him to the respective shelf so that my time is not really wasted so much. So the basic purpose of, and we started our discussion that now we are moving into the predictive data science. It means that I want to predict certain things in the given context. I want to predict the production of rice. I want to predict the next thing that my customer could buy. And therefore, I am going to use this outcome of the machine learning, and it becomes relevant for me only when I am able to predict on things which I have not seen as yet. There is no point in just trying to become a good predictor based on the past data. So if we take the example of the rice production and the rainfall, I have got some past data. I can build an algorithm which will give me a very accurate estimation for the past data. But that is not going to be of much use because what I want to know
is the rice production for this year. So these are two different things. One is that making a prediction of the past and making a prediction of the future. What happens in the machine learning process is that because of the huge computing power that it has, the during the training process, the system has a tendency to start memorizing things, and therefore it will make a very good prediction on the data which I have exposed to the machine, or data which I have given to the machine. But many a times it may or may not do a prediction on that data which the machine has not seen, and that is the reason that even before training we take out some data and say that I will not show you this data, rather I will test you on some data which is not exposed to you during the training process. So the training model, we will give only the training data, and therefore we split our X and Y both into two parts. One is the training set and one is called the testing set.
Okay. So first we split data into two. One is called the features and second is the labels. And then we split again these two into training and testing. So I have X train and X test and Y train and Y test. This is what we will do. And there is for doing that, again, you have a very simple command. We will import the train test split function. And then we call this function, and the parameters that we give is the X and Y. And here we can define that in what ratio we want to split that. We can split that into 20/80, that is 20 will be for the testing purposes and 80 will be for training purposes, or we can give 10/90, 15/85, whatever you want, but 20/80 is the what is conventionally used as the most widely used distribution between the training and the testing. That's what we are doing here. So we pass the parameter, we pass X, Y, and the size to the train test split, and then it will give me these four different data sets. So it will automatically divide this into four different data sets. Let's do that. And then we print the shape of this. So if you see earlier,
It had 20,640 records overall. Now it has split that into two. 80% is going into train data and 20% has become my test data. So when we train the algorithm, it will train on only this data set, which will have 16,000 records. These 4,000 records is not even exposed to the algorithm. So algorithm does not have any idea what these 4,000 records are. And after we have optimized the process, after the machine learning algorithm has been run, whatever is the final output, I will try to also, I will test that, or I'll see what is the accuracy of the prediction on these 4,000 records. And if that is good, then we are very happy that it is actually making good prediction on the data which is not seen by the training algorithm. And therefore, it may work very well when we go to the real life. When we deploy these in the real life, then I have a fair degree of confidence that it will also make good prediction, because it is making good prediction on the data which it has not seen, and therefore when a new customer comes, it is able to make a good prediction. So having done that, now we select the model. So again, from the sklearn library, the commands are very simple. If you can see here, just 2 lines of command. I select the model. So there are different types of models available. We learn about these models as we go along, but for today's small demonstration of how simple these things are going to be for you, I am choosing a linear model. We'll talk about the other models as we go along. So again, from the sklearn library, I import a linear model. And then from linear model, I choose the linear regression. So again, I instantiate this. So I create an instance of this particular model, and that I give the name as model. So I say model is equal to linear model dot linear regression, and we instantiate this. So once we create an instance of that, and that instance is named as model. So as we have seen from our class discussions earlier, that you can create different models, and then we can create different instances of a class. That is what is being done here. So having created that particular instance, now we can access the different functions of this class. So linear regression is the class which may have different functions available. Having created the instance of that, now we can access the uh, different functions which is there a part of the linear regression. Okay, so we call the function of fit here. So fit function we call, and to that fit now we are giving x train and y train, not x and y, but only x train and y train, because we want to train the model only with a subset of the data we have got. So again, very simple here. We train the model, and the output of that we store into another variable called trained model. So training the model is done by calling the fit function. So when we call the fit function of the linear regression, that is where the training process happens. And the training, for training, I give the data to the training function, and the data we give is the x train and y train. Now if I run this, let me run first instantiation of model, then we train the model. You see, so fast it has done. So 20,000 records, training, optimization, everything has happened within a fraction of a second. Now I have the trained model. Now based on that, we'll start making the predictions. So I had done the instantiation, and that instance is stored as a variable called model. Then from there, first I called a fit function. Then now I am calling the predict function. And now I am making the prediction on, if you notice here, on X test, not on the train. I can find out on the train also, but whether the algorithm is working very well or not, that will be the real test lies on seeing that how it makes a prediction on the test data set, which was not seen by the model during the training process. So I make the prediction for the test data, and I store that into another variable called prediction. And then I find the R square and the RMSE. So again, from the model, I call another function called score, which gives me the R squared. And I give the test data to it. So it will give me the R square of the predictions on the test data. And then I also compute the RMSE, or the root mean square error, of the predictions which we have made. So if I run this one, it gives me the R square of 0.64, and the RMSE is 68,000. Whether it is good or bad, we will see in the next classes, but the algorithm has been optimized. We can also see the coefficients of this. So here we can also get the coefficients by so these are the coefficient numbers you are getting. I'll explain to you that what these are, but these are the values of the B. So B1, B2, B3, B4. These are the values of the B that we have got. We'll understand that in more detail later on. So today was to demonstrate to you that as we go into the machine learning, the optimization process is actually a fairly simple process, and therefore, even if you are, and you see that the actual commands that we'd be using from Python is actually not very complex ones, just 2 lines for training, 2 lines for splitting that. So
That should give you the confidence that even if you did not have too much of an programming experience, you will still be able to work with the predictive data science or the machine learning algorithms. So just to summarize what we have discussed today, we started going into the machine learning part of it, because with the machine learning, we can handle the predictive data science, and machine learning is the instrument we use today for the predictive data science, because these are very powerful, very accurate. Before going into the machine learning, we saw the principles behind the machine learning, and we saw that how at a certain conceptual level, we can say that if we take the example of the aircraft and the birds, if we understand the basic principles of aerodynamics, then we start seeing birds as the biological implementation of the same principles, and the aircraft as the mechanical implementation of the principles of aerodynamics. Similarly, once we understood the process of the memory storage and retrieval, once we understood the principles behind that, then we see human beings as the biological implementation of the information storage and retrieval process. Human brain is a biological implementation, and the computers in their memory chips, they are the electronic implementation of the same principle of information storage and retrieval. And therefore, if we are able to figure out what are the underlying principles of learning, then there is no reason why learning as a process cannot be externalized into machines. And learning then does not become the sole domain of the human beings. The learnings can be done by the machines also. But we have to see that whether we have been able to understand the process of learning properly or not. Then we see that how do the human beings learn? Human beings also learn by getting exposed to certain data. We get exposed to language, then we start learning language. We get exposed to uh, different faces, and then we start learning about the faces. So similarly, in the machine learning, we once we expose the machine to a good amount of data, and then if we have an optimization process, then the machines can learn. And one of the examples is the so three kinds of learning: supervised learning, unsupervised learning, and the reinforcement learning. In the supervised learning, we give the data and the expected result. In the unsupervised learning, we just give the data and ask the computers to make sense of that data. We don't give any expected result. In the case of the reinforcement learning, even data may not be given. We see that these are the rules, and especially trained in certain specific scenarios like playing games. Uh, Using those rules, the system starts playing the games, and then we give a reward for the winning moves, and therefore it will start refining those. It will start giving more weightage to the moves which win the game, and therefore gradually it will go on refining. It will go on creating a good repository of the moves which actually help the machine win, and in the process it learns how to win the game. So that's the reinforcement learning. Then we took one example of the supervised learning, and we saw that how simple it is to actually do things which we are doing manually on the Excel sheet with a small set of 5 or 10 data elements. Now we see that even if we have a very large data set of more than 20,000 uh, uh, data elements, how we can apply the same on uh, how we can use these machine learning algorithms to make a very fast prediction. By writing just maybe about 10 lines of codes, we are able to get the values of the R square and the RMSE. It means that my training process is done, and my system has started making predictions, and we will go into some more detail tomorrow. Any questions for today? Sure. So, what you can do is that if there are certain questions which you have not been able to understand, or if you want me to re-emphasize emphasize a few things in the next session, you can put that on the WhatsApp also, so that I ensure that I don't run with my own pace. But if there are certain places where I need to stop and elaborate, I will do that. So also feel free to use the WhatsApp channel to just give me a feedback that these are the things maybe you should revisit in tomorrow's session, because in the previous session these things were not very clear, or we want to spend some more time on that. Let's do that. So I would expect that feedback from you on the WhatsApp channel in case you want to, want me to go slow on a few things, or you want me to revisit a few things, or spend more time on few things. Okay. Fine, then we'll meet again tomorrow morning. And thanks for attending today's session. Again, we'll meet at 7 tomorrow. Thank you.